Hello, and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 27th Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1954. George Seaton adapted a play called The Country Girl to the big screen, with three of the biggest stars of the day, Grace Kelly, Bing Crosby, and William Holden. Grace Kelly famously went on to win the Oscar for Best Actress for the film, defeating a heavily favored Judy Garland in the process, while the film itself won the Screenplay Award. But it was the Marlon Brando drama On the Waterfront that dominated the other awards, winning 8 Oscars, including Best Picture. So why did The Country Girl come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to The Country Girl. Welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today I have a very special guest who is a very devoted listener of And the Runner-Up Is, and you first heard him on a bonus episode, actually, talking The Fighter with me and Michael Domenico. He is a contributor at InSession Film and host of the Gayvourites podcast. Please welcome to the show, Daniel Brilliant.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. You are also kind of a trailblazer here because you're the first person to ever start on a bonus episode and then graduate up to a regular episode.
You know, I like to consider myself a unique individual.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like on SNL when they're like testing people out as a featured player, but then when they get good enough, they get bumped up to a repertory player or something. So, congrats.
I mean, you know, good year to come on for.
Very good year you've got here. Lots of juicy stuff to get to, particularly one very controversial Best Actress race, but we will certainly get to that. But first, we will be talking in full about The Country Girl, which is the, pretty clear for me at least, runner-up that lost Best Picture to On the Waterfront. So, The Country Girl is a drama based on the 1950 play of the same name about a fading star named Frank Elgin who successfully gets a part in a new musical, having been given a chance by the musical's director, Bernie Dodd, despite a lot of opposition from those around him. And Frank is an alcoholic, and he's married to a woman named Georgie, who is the titular country girl. And she takes care of him to kind of help him succeed in his career. Eventually, we learn that Frank is harboring guilt over this tragedy in his past, and while his wife is controlling him in many ways, or at least appears to be, some of the reason behind some of his shortcomings, you know, everyone eventually sort of learns that the truth is more complicated. And Frank is really his own worst enemy. And meanwhile, we have Bernie having sort of an antagonistic relationship with Georgie, but soon finds himself falling for her. So the film was written and directed by George Seaton. It stars Bing Crosby as Frank, Grace Kelly as Georgie, William Holden as Bernie, Anthony Ross, Gene Reynolds, Eddie Ryder, Robert Kent, and more. So The Country Girl made $6.5 million at the U.S. box office. Not exactly like a blockbuster by any means, but solid. And was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, winning 2, but not Best Picture. All right, Daniel. So what are your general thoughts on The Country Girl?
So I went in with low expectations because obviously, like, everyone knows this was not a close Best Picture race. Yeah. On the Waterfront won very easily. But I think this is a movie that deserves some re-examination because I was pleasantly surprised at how much I like this movie.
Yeah, I will agree. I think that the Best Actress stuff sort of overshadows the actual examination of the film itself. And I agree. I think that first and foremost, the highlight of The Country Girl is indeed the acting. I think Grace Kelly, Bing Crosby, and William Holden are all giving really, really juicy parts to work with, and they make the most of them.
I really liked George Seaton's screenplay in here as well. I think it was very, very well structured.
Mm-hmm. I definitely expected good things from Grace Kelly, considering she wins Best Actress for this, but I have to say I think Bing Crosby is really something in this. He's able to really convey this sense of brokenness within Frank, and I would say it's a little bit similar to what Mary Tyler Moore and Timothy Hutton are sort of conveying in Ordinary People, which is this very unspeakable loss of something in the past, and how when something like that happens to you, it basically just breaks you, and there's nothing you could do, and it's just so difficult to put one foot in front of the other. And I love how Bing Crosby presents himself in just such a fragile way.
I completely agree. I mean, of course you go in expecting greatness from Grace Kelly, because this was the year of Grace Kelly.
Yeah, she was having a moment.
But Bing, I mean, I know this role must have been personal to him, because if you know anything about Bing Crosby, I'm pretty sure he was an alcoholic himself.
Yeah.
And Frank Elgin here is portrayed as an alcoholic. And I think you can tell that this role really hit home for him, because there was just some raw emotion he was bringing throughout the whole of the film, and you just really felt for Frank in a lot of it.
Yeah. And I was doing some reading a little bit behind the scenes and how he had asked George Seaton to write up this big biography of Frank, to really just dive headfirst into this character, leading all the way up to when we first see him auditioning for the play at the beginning. And I think there's something so fascinating about Bing Crosby at this point in his career, having done all these just very sort of affable, likable roles throughout his career. But then at this point, it feels like he's really being I'm going to flex some of my acting chops here. Not to say anything bad about what he did in the past, obviously, but really here you can tell he's really stretching, which is really quite fascinating to see.
And also, didn't he have White Christmas this year as well?
He did have White Christmas.
So even in this year, he contrasted himself so much. And exactly. I think you think of Bing Crosby as one thing, but I think this role really shows that he was more versatile than he was given credit for.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm glad that this came around for him, and I'm glad the Academy recognized him for it, even just with a nomination. And I think just broadening it out, speaking to the story aspect, like you said, the screenplay is a big highlight, and I think it's very much a movie, for me, with how I read it, that's kind of about performance. It's sort of about how Frank is pretending to be okay after all this time, and it's about Georgie kind of hoping that Frank can be okay so that he can move forward and not get stuck in this rut. And in order to do so, she has to really pretend that he is okay so he can get the part in the musical. And it's also about Bernie pretending that Frank is well enough to perform, even as everyone around him is really doubting his judgment. And I think kind of on some level that Bernie really knows that there's something holding Frank back. It's just that he's very misplaced in what he thinks is the reason behind it, and is quite sexist in the process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if there's any knock I would give to the film, it's that, and that's probably why I wouldn't give it a perfect score, but it's it's very well done.
Yes, yeah. And it's the added layer in addition to the performance angle. I think the meta level of Bing Crosby and Grace Kelly really playing against type, I think, is kind of an added layer to that, because Grace Kelly is known as this beautiful, prim sort of ice queen almost, and here we see her doing a bit of a de-glam, as they say, though it's not like Charlize Theron doing Monster or anything like that. It's just, she still looks like herself, but she's definitely more dressed down and wearing glasses and looks a little more, I guess, working class.
If there was any Best Actress one I'd compare this to, it's actually Jennifer Lawrence in Silver Linings Playbook.
Go on.
Because, Jennifer Lawrence in that role was playing a role that was against type at the time, because obviously she was very young. and then chose to play a widow.
Right.
And of course, Grace Kelly at this time was very young and was
Mm-hmm.
playing the mother of a dead child.
Yeah, around the
And
same age. Yeah.
yeah, like Grace Kelly was 24, Jennifer Lawrence was 21.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like also very much, I think both those like each of their wins really was like for performances against type that were for more mature roles.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, we'll get a little more into the Best Actress decision a little later, but I do think it was the sort of thing of being like, this is the take me seriously sort of thing. Like, I'm not just going to be a pretty face. I'm not just going to be this person in the horror Hitchcock movies. I can really stretch myself. Unfortunately, she would become Grace of Monaco and then not really do much after this, just for reasons that she couldn't do that. But I do wonder what she could have done afterwards that could have really been on the same level as the country girl.
Or even Rear Window, which we'll discuss in a bit. Like,
Exactly.
she really had a year in 54.
And I think that the film and Bing Crosby really put in the work to show sort of the excuses that a man who is just trying to get by and doing anything, saying anything to do so, whether it's like lying about a bottle of alcohol that he's keeping under his bed or blaming some of his shortcomings on his wife, little white lies that people tell in order to sort of escape responsibility of being an alcoholic. I think that was very well captured there, and he has a lot of fragility in his performance and sort of a desperation that's quite compelling, very affecting.
And I think we need to bring up William Holden a bit more because
yes, of course.
It boggles my mind he didn't get a supporting actor nom for this. He is phenomenal in this movie.
Yes, and I think some of that goes back to the discussion of stars don't belong in supporting, that whole thing. This would probably be considered a 3-lead film where William Holden would have been placed in the lead category. But, I mean, I think the caliber of his performance is solid enough that I wouldn't have been mad at all with a nomination in lead. Yeah, I think he's very good. I think this is a kind of role that he would do quite a bit, kind of in this time of sort of this sort of very masculine, rakish sort of guy who's making comments but also being very like manly and all that stuff. I mean, we just talked about him with Picnic. We know what the deal with this guy.
And talk about someone else who had a year. I mean, he had 2 other movies in the Oscar conversation this year himself.
Exactly. Sabrina being a big one. But I do wonder if maybe some votes sort of split with him.
I mean, yeah, because he was also a lead in Executive Suite, so that's what I would assume.
Right. Something I love about his character, too, is that it feels like throughout the film he sort of thinks he has it all figured out. He's always talking about how untrustworthy women are based on some of his experiences with his wife and his past relationships and all that. And he keeps doling out these little pearls of wisdom, as Georgie says at one point. Like, talking about how there's only 2 reasons why people stop drinking. One is they die, or the other is that they actively choose to, or something like that. And then at another point, it's when he tells Georgie about how some women pay too much attention to themselves and others don't pay enough attention. And Georgie has a cute little retort to that. And but by the end, I think he is sort of proven that he doesn't really know it all, because I think he's quite surprised when he finds himself attracted to Georgie. There's a very interesting sexual chemistry there between him and Georgie that I wanted to sort of explore here. I think it's quite palpable, even when they're arguing with each other.
I mean, especially when they're arguing with each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's very passionate, yes. And sort of that passion could go from hate to love very easily.
And I just think that the best parts of this film are the scenes between Holden and Kelly. Like, those two just had fireworks going off whenever they shared a scene.
Yeah. Definitely. But I think by the end, with what the film has to sort of say about forgiveness and being patient with the ones you love and all that, and overcoming some of your speed bumps or whatever, I think the ending where they don't end up together, it does make sense. right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie is really human in a way. It kind of treats everybody like non-judgmentally and allows you to see a real human experience, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah. What do you think about the musical within the film? I believe it's called The Land Around Us. Some sort of Oklahoma looking knockoff.
It's very 1950s.
Yes, it's a mess, and I feel like there are no memorable songs from it. And I was watching this film, and I was like, huh, this is interesting. There's all these sort of musical numbers throughout this. I'm curious why this didn't get maybe an original song nominations for one of these. But then by the end of the film, John honestly didn't remember a single one of them, which was probably why.
Although the songs were written by Harold Arlen and Ira Gershwin, two Oscar winners, I believe.
Yes, this is true. But I feel like it's like just mediocre enough, but also passable enough that like you would understand why it would be made, but also it's not quite on the level of the types of things that we'd love.
I mean, look, given that this was the time of, say, Oklahoma or something like, say, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Oh boy, yes. That's one we'll
it's not surprising.
Yeah.
It's not surprising they went with that kind of musical in here.
Yes, exactly. Some of the technical elements of the film I also want to talk about, because certainly it's a film that highlights the acting and the writing and all that, but I want to talk about some of the more theatrical sort of staging of it all. Did you respond to any and how it was filmed, the cinematography, anything like that?
Oh, I thought it was gorgeously shot, personally.
Yeah, I think the production design, the cinematography, really well captured. I like that they use black and white with this. Probably the right call over color, certainly, to deal with some of the sort of darker, shadowy themes of the story. And I think the cinematography is also very actor friendly, I guess I could say, because it's very focused with the sort of the spotlight right on everyone. All the emotions, you see it going on their face. So it's quite formal.
In terms of the cinematography, the scene I keep going back to is when Grace Kelly exits the stage from the backstage door into the outside. And I just keep thinking about the lighting of that scene, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Very, very gorgeously filmed. I do wonder if it's almost too stagey in a way, or maybe that's the point. I don't know. It's hard to say, considering they are kind of dealing with acting and sort of the musical aspect of things. It feels quite cramped, you know.
I think that they're just trying to give us the feel of what a production like that would feel like.
Yeah.
And I love the way they shoot like the dressing rooms. I mean, you can definitely tell what the dressing rooms of the time were like in the way it's shot.
Exactly. Yeah. Another scene I really, really enjoy, even though it doesn't have a lot to do with a lot of the film, is when Frank is in the nightclub and he's having a drink, of course, because that's what he does. And there's that woman who's just performing, the lounge singer. And he just sort of takes the mic and sings a song because he knows it. And I was really captivated by that particular scene and by Jacqueline Fontaine, who plays the lounge singer. Very juicy sort of one scene part that she really makes the most of.
Yeah, and also, just to go back to performance for a sec, I think we should talk a bit about Anthony Ross. Because, sure. I mean, that is a really interesting character.
Yes, the show's producer, I believe he's playing, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And yes, is doing a lot of disapproving and shaking his head through a lot of this. Very much not on board with whatever William Holden has in his head for the performance that Frank is trying to give.
I mean, it feels very meta for its time. I mean, you wouldn't think you would get that kind of producer-director relationship in an portrayal in an era of the studio system. And like, I just found it interesting to like all those interactions with Holden and Ross just I feel like that just brought a lot to light of what being a theater director and a theater producer was like at the time. I think it gave me this movie has a really good sense of time and place.
Yeah. And it does represent the push and pull that goes on behind the scenes here. And with not just theatrical productions, but of course film as well. It's
Because,
not.
like, I
Yeah.
could see this almost as a meta commentary on some of those producers like Selznick who would interfere in everything.
Um. So, is there like a key scene for you with Grace Kelly in particular that you feel like really sort of crystallizes her and her performance and why it resonated with people, or do you think it's just sort of on the whole the sort of everything that went into her performance?
I would say probably two. So the
Mm-hmm.
first being her very first scene of the film, because she just makes an impact from the get-go.
Oh yes, sitting at the table, right? Is that what she's doing?
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
just the way she talks to Holden and the way she's bossing around Bing Crosby, she is just making her presence known immediately.
Yes. So very in control. Yes.
And then the one I would call her Oscar scene is the one where she argues with William Holden at the prison.
Yeah.
Because I think she's obviously like giving a real performance in that scene.
Mm-hmm. Something I really love about what she does just throughout is the level of complexity she has. That Georgie is kind of this woman who is clearly a few decades younger than Frank, but has really gone through a lot of this sort of turmoil already, stemming from the loss of their child, right? And she still really loves Frank very dearly and really wants what's best for him. But she's also getting very frustrated and bitter, and I think understandably so, to be honest. I was fully on her side through most of this. I don't know about you.
I was.
Yeah. She's like the person in the background really keeping things together sort of for the both of them, barely getting any recognition for that. And I think, I mean, she's also like often criticized by people like Bernie for being too controlling. But then you can also see how someone like Georgie might be attracted to Bernie type because he's so confident and decisive, and William Holden, I mean, seems to have it all put together. Plus, he's younger and he's sexier, more virile, all that stuff. So I think there's a lot of complexity to what she is asked to do, and I don't think she ever really overplays it too much, even though it's a very theatrical film in many ways. I think she makes it feel a lot more understated and natural than what might be on the page. So, yeah, I don't think it's a bad win at all.
Neither do I.
I mean, the thing is the competition, which again, we will get to, but sort of in a vacuum, I think it's the best type of performance that she could give with the character she has, and not go too over the top with it, considering the time period. So I don't have a huge problem with it, even if I maybe disagree with the Academy's choice there. Maybe.
I mean, we've discussed this offline. Our sentiments are shared.
Yes, we've said this like multiple times. So, any other noteworthy stray observations you want to make on the Country Girl before we talk about the Oscar stuff?
I really liked the flashback sequence they used to show the incident with their son.
Yes.
I think it was extremely effectively shot and extremely effectively framed, because you can tell it's shot slightly differently than the rest of the film.
Right.
And it just sets up the emotional impact of the rest of the film as well. It tells you why Frank and Georgie are where they are and how they got there.
Yes. And I appreciate that the film does allow a little bit of mystery leading up to that point where you don't exactly know the full extent of what happened there, and it's sort of teased out very naturally. And yeah, that flashback scene where I believe it's him having to pose for a photo of him like looking at the record or something like that, and then his son just runs off and that happens, is very very harrowing, very striking. And you really feel like in that moment, it's like when you see that happen, you automatically know exactly why Frank is how he is. So definitely agree. That's a big highlight for me as well. Anything else about the ending that you wanted to touch on here? Because we have the love triangle really comes into play at the end.
I mean, I think it ends naturally, really.
Yeah. Georgie and Bernie are really starting to explore some interests in each other, but it all sort of culminates at this party where Frank is demonstrating that he is able to kind of change for the better and actively wants to get better and overcome some of his fears. And I think in that moment you can see where Georgie is like, okay, he's willing to sort of go forward on his own accord, and I appreciate that, and I feel like I can be with him now. And they all sort of end on amicable terms, and it's all sort of a happy ending. Maybe not so much for Bertie, but that's fine. I didn't expect one for him, to be quite frank. But on the whole, I will say this is a movie that you should watch for the performances. I think it's not like an earth-shattering sort of story, but as we've sort of highlighted here, I think the level of the performances are enough to watch it, especially if you're a fan of Bing Crosby in particular, who I think is the MVP here. Definitely the most striking, dramatic role of his career.
And also, if you're an Oscar completionist, you got to watch this Grace Kelly performance, because it's not a bad one at all.
Well, there's that, yes. To see the woman who beats Judy Garland. So, when we come back, we will be discussing the Oscar run of The Country Girl and why it lost Best Picture to On the Waterfront.
This is the story of three people at the crucial moment in their lives. How they face it and what they become to each other. That's our story.
Bing Crosby as Frank Elgin, a surprising and striking portrayal, far different than anything else he has ever done. Grace Kelly, Academy Award winner for this, her greatest performance as Georgie Elgin, the country girl.
Georgie. And I might forgive even you, Mr. Dodd, if you can keep him up long enough for me to get out from under. All I want is my own name and a modest job to buy sugar for my coffee.
Will you listen?
You can't believe that, can you? You can't believe that a woman is crazy out of her mind to live alone in one room by herself.
William Holden as Bernie Dodd, another powerful characterization from the screen's top dramatic star.
When you took this job, I promised you no pity. And no pity it's going to be.
I don't expect any. I'm only warning you, get rid of me. Let me go back to New York.
So you can tell the boys at the Lambs Club that you quit because the part wasn't big enough? Oh, no. If you leave this show, it'll only be for one reason. Because I fire you. Because I fire you for being an unreliable, slobbering drunk.
And we're back. So now we'll be discussing why The Country Girl lost Best Picture to On the Waterfront. The Country Girl was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for George Seaton, Best Actor for Bing Crosby, Best Actress for Grace Kelly, Best Screenplay, Best Art Direction Black and White, Best Cinematography Black and White. And it walked away with two of the big ones, Best Actress and Best Screenplay. And before the Oscars, The Country Girl didn't exactly win anything as a film, but Grace Kelly swept pretty much all of the Best Actress awards. And then we had On the Waterfront sweeping all of the Best Picture prizes, essentially. It won the Golden Globe, it won Directors Guild, it won Writers Guild, it won New York Film Critics, it won National Board of Review. So it walks into Oscar night with 12 nominations, more than any other film, and is pretty clearly going to win Best Picture. So Daniel, why do you think The Country Girl did not necessarily get there, and why do you think On the Waterfront did?
Simple answer. On the Waterfront's a masterpiece.
The answer is On the Waterfront is better.
Like, if you watch On the Waterfront, you'll know what I mean.
Yeah. For me, it's definitely one of the cream of the crop Best Picture winners for me of all time. Kazan was so ahead of his time, you know? It's sort of producing this very gritty realistic look at the working class and sort of the journey of this guy. And I think a lot of Academy members were appreciative of the fact that this was a guy who's really taking a big risk on this film, and it really does not feel like a studio film. It feels very much like an indie, honestly, that wins Best Picture over a lot of big studio fare.
And I was discussing this with you earlier. A few years earlier, Kazan had A Streetcar Named Desire and did not win Picture or Director for A Streetcar Named Desire because a little movie called American in Paris and a little movie called A Place in the Sun were there.
Yep.
Really tough year.
Very, very tough year. If it came out in any other year, probably would have done a lot better.
And I feel like On the Waterfront was just an exclamation point after A Streetcar Named Desire for Kazan, and like the Academy was just totally ready to give him everything.
Yeah, they gave him his things, and I appreciate that. Yeah. Also, Marlon Brando, I mean, we need to talk about this performance, right?
Oh my goodness.
I'm just going to say it again, one of the best actor winners, in addition to being one of the best picture winners. I think he just really brings this character to life with all this brooding intensity. You know, it's like I was saying with James Dean with Giant, it's sort of the different kind of leading man, you know. He's just warts and all, just really pouring everything into his performance. You know, his big speech in the car, obviously everyone
could
knows.
Have been a contender, could have been somebody.
Instead of a bum, which is what I am. Yes, which we should mention here serves as a bit of inspiration for one of our segments, Should Have Been a Contender. That's the origin story there. I'm sure everyone knew that, but just pointing it out. But even watching that segment now, even though it's been overplayed and sort of parodied to death, and I imagine people have heard that before and don't even know it's from On the Waterfront. But I think in that scene, he just creates this whole backstory for his character, everything that was leading up to that point, and he just sort of evokes that sense of regret that it's like you're just seeing the history of this character.
And we also have to talk about Eva Marie Saint, one of the great supporting actress winners of all time.
Yes, see, a lot of all-timers just with this one film. Yes. Yeah, Eva Marie Saint kind of coming out of nowhere in many ways. She was on TV, I believe, before this, and really skyrockets here with a really stellar performance. Again, definitely a performance that could be a lot more histrionic than what she does. She really underplays it a lot, and yeah, she has really beautiful chemistry with Marlon Brando as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more that needs to be said. The emotion she brings, I mean, she just brings such raw emotion.
Yeah, and she has such a fascinating character arc as well for herself that some have said, maybe is she more of a lead than a supporting? And that leads us right into our first question. Sexy transition. This was from Juan Carlos Ollano saying, Eva Marie Saint in On the Waterfront, lead or supporting? What's your take?
I mean, I would keep her in supporting because we're going to talk about this Best Actress lineup.
Yes. But
even if she's a straddler, like the cat also supporting actress this year outside of her was barren. Completely barren.
Yeah, it's a mess.
So, like, this was an easy win for her and a deserved win, and putting her in actress wouldn't have resulted in this. So...
Right. I still think she's supporting, honestly. I think this is the story of Marlon Brando's character. I think even if she has a lot of solid screen time, and even if she is the female lead, quote unquote, I don't think it's from her perspective very much. And I think, I was even looking at a very useful resource for me, ScreenTimeCentral.com, which tracks all the screen time of all the Oscar-nominated performances. She's in 37% of the film, which is not 50. So, I mean, I feel like that's enough of a case for me that she's perfectly fine in supporting. Plus, there was the whole thing, like we were saying, of people who are stars belong in lead, people who are more characters or, up-and-comers belong in supporting. So I'm not surprised that Eva Marie Saint is here, but I sort of understand why some might say she straddles the line.
And we should talk about the 3 supporting actor nominees from this film also.
Yes, which Juan Carlos Ollano also wanted us to talk about, saying which of those supporting actors is your pick to win.
And I think we actually have different answers here. I would have gone with Carl Malden, who previously won for A Streetcar Named Desire, because I just think Father Barry brings so much, morality to the film, and a needed morality. He's a great contrast to what Brando and the mob bosses in this movie are like.
Yes, that is very true. Yeah. So you'd have given him 2 Oscars.
Yeah.
That's fair. Those are his only 2 nominations, I believe, through his career. But 2 very deserved ones. Yes. Carl Malden would be my second place. I would definitely give it to Lee J. Cobb because I'm just a huge fan of what he was able to do in this time period. I talked a lot about him in 12 Angry Men, about how, back when I watched this film and in film studies, I gave him my Best Supporting Actor win for 12 Angry Men. And this was also a huge contributing factor to that as well, because we also watched On the Waterfront, and he just has that brooding, villainous intensity to him. Probably would have been my pick, but I definitely would not have been mad with a Carl Malden victory here either. I think either of them would have deserved it over the person who actually won.
Yeah. And not to give short shrift to Rod Steiger, but he's more of a one-scene wonder in this.
Yes, exactly. Playing the brother of the Marlon Brando character. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a coattail nomination, to be honest. And I mean, not to say anything bad about Rod Steiger, because he's a wonderful actor, but in the right film at the right time, much like Jackie Weaver in Silver Linings Playbook.
And, Rod Steiger got his about a decade later, so...
Exactly, for The Heat of the Night, so he's all taken care of. So the other question for On the Waterfront was from Ronaldo Sosa, who said, did Marlon Brando win solely based on his performance, or was this also a makeup for not giving it to him for Streetcar?
I mean, it's kind of not even close on performance in terms of the category, but also it's a makeup for Streetcar. It's both.
Yeah, I would say, why not both? Right? Yeah, I think he had built up enough goodwill at that point in his career, certainly, that they would want to reward him for this. And,
ironically, he beat Humphrey Bogart here.
Yes, who obviously beat him for The African Queen in 1951. Yeah. Let's see. I think I had a quote from Inside Oscar about this. Yes. This comes from our friend Joan Crawford. Oh, Lord. Yeah. She had a quote in regard to Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront. She said she was discussing the torn T-shirt school of acting, as they say. And she said, I don't like it. It's as if they're trying to impose their psychiatric difficulties on the audience.
I mean, rich coming from Joan Crawford.
Not a fan. Not a fan of the overacting from Joan Crawford. Moving on. We got a question, yes, from our friend Faye Dunaway's Salad Boy about The Country Girl, who said, do you think The Country Girl is unfairly affected by people thinking it's bad because of what it beat syndrome regarding Kelly especially? I loved it and her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that?
I mean, no, he's 100%. I mean, our friend Kyle.
Yes.
Oftentimes has great insight, and he's right here.
I agree. He's right here. And like we were saying, it's a film that's not often discussed, and it should be discussed more because, like we said, filled with amazing performances, not just from Grace Kelly, but especially from Bing Crosby. So as far as why The Country Girl didn't actually end up winning, going back to that, I really just think it's a case of, On the Waterfront is just too clear of a choice that any film, I think, would not be able to stand a chance against. Well, I think it is a solid number 2. I don't really think it was a close race at all. I think it's good that it won for Best Actress, and especially for screenplay, which is, I think, a very key indicator that there was some support for The Country Girl, but it's just one of these things where you can't deny the front runner.
Nope.
Let's move on to some of these Best Picture nominees, the other ones, shall we?
I want to talk about Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Oh boy. So yes, go right ahead. Start us off.
I mean, look, what a treat. Seriously, I love glossy 50s musicals. I love them. They're like cinematic candy.
Even if they can be problematic sometimes.
Oh yeah, this movie is extremely problematic.
Yeah. I mean, there is a review that was just posted on Letterboxd a few days ago by someone named Patrick Willems, and he pretty much summed up Seven Brides for Seven Brothers in, for me, the most succinct and accurate way possible, and I wrote it down because it's very true. He said, "A truly deranged film."
It's true.
That's it.
I mean, I enjoyed the heck out of watching this movie.
Yes. So we should explain, it's a musical directed by Stanley Donen. So
Legend.
Yes. Really, it shows, is my point, because the choreography in this is, like, kind of on another level, right?
It's absurd. The barn raising sequence especially.
Yes. Bonkers. I love it. I was nervous for the actors who are, like, dancing on these tiny wooden planks and are just doing it so expertly.
I mean, this movie is just a treat for musical lovers.
Yeah, and they're, like, chopping wood in time to the music, right?
And at one point, like, so Jane Powell, who's the lead actress, who I think has great screen presence in this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
At one point, I mean, obviously she's married to the main man, Howard Keel, and she says to his brothers, "Your winter clothes need some washing," and just all of a sudden, they just take off their clothes and are just wearing nothing but blankets, and I'm like, 1954. You're just really, you get me.
Exactly. There's a lot of handsome brothers in there.
I mean, my personal favorite is Russ Tamblyn because you know what? I like ginger twinks.
You love a ginger. I feel that. Story wise, it's definitely one of those films that has the sexist overtones. Even at one point, like, having a lot of the brothers just kidnapping their girlfriends and putting them over their shoulder, just taking them off to their town. Very primitive, almost caveman like, but hey, it's the 1850s, so hey,
And they're all just getting into fights all the time.
Yes. It's a really interesting sort of juxtaposition of a very manly sort of masculine energy, but also this sort of wonderful Stanley Donen musical at the same time. Very fascinating sort of mix to watch. Very entertaining. Full of joy, It just has the sort of old-fashioned classic musical feel to it that I think you and I probably both agree that you pretty much forgive anything that story-wise is a little iffy, right, by the end.
Yeah, and I would be a bad gay if I didn't mention Julie Newmar was in this.
Yes. And yeah, I will say Jane Powell is a good sort of center, a good moral center of the film as well. Not nominated, and that's fine, but...
And she's still around.
Yes. Still kicking. Look at her go.
As is Julie Newmar, as is Russ Tamblyn.
And Russ Tamblyn, exactly, yeah. Yeah, all these years later. The Cane Mutiny.
Yeah, it's just there. It's there.
So this is the only other Best Picture nominee that I would even consider as a slight possibility as a runner-up, even though it didn't win anything. Just because it was like this big box office hit with all these stars in it. Based on this Pulitzer Prize winning novel. It's definitely a little more weighty than some of the others here that one we'll be talking about in a little bit. It's all about this mutiny. Obviously, it's right in the title. And Humphrey Bogart is the commander who likes to play with these little silver balls. And I think it's a very Beatty character for him. He's kind of playing this very paranoid commander type who's starting to lose his grip on his power and also losing his grip on reality. And this is solid. I think the pacing's a little off, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a little overlong.
Yes. It all really sort of ramps up to this big climax, only to have like this 20-minute drawn-out courtroom sequence at the end. But it's a solid film, and I can definitely see why certain people love it. I know, for example, I was reading that Vince Gilligan of Breaking Bad is a huge fan of the Caine Mutiny. Just throwing that out there.
I think this is a Steak Eaters movie.
It's definitely the Steak Eaters movie of here, in addition to On the Waterfront, but this one's
this
even
is
more
like
traditional.
way more of the Steak Eaters movie. And what surprised me about this one is the supporting actor nominee who got in.
Yes, Tom Tully. We got a question about it, actually. So this was from Joe Govea, who said, do you think Bogart and Brando should have switched winning years, i.e. Brando wins for Streetcar and Bogart wins for Mutiny? That's the first part.
Nobody should have won over Marlon Brando in 1954, so I already know my answer.
Period. Yeah. I will just say that it's fine how it worked out. Yeah. I'm happy that Marlon Brando has his Oscar for On the Waterfront, even if...
Well, he has 2 Oscars, but...
Well, right, yes, okay. But between the 2 of them...
And well, he rejected the other one, so...
Exactly, the only one he wanted. That one of them is not for Streetcar, even if it's such an iconic role and like the one performance that people feel have most stood the test of time through the years. I'm still fine that they both have the Oscars that they have. Let's just say that. But
and
then,
also,
yeah.
Like I was looking back at Bogart's career, the 51 win was really making up for Casablanca.
Yes, exactly. So that's fine. It's fine. He also asked, why do you think Tom Tully was singled out from the Caine Mutiny while Jose Ferrer provided a much more powerful supporting actor performance?
I really have no idea, because I would have nominated Jose Ferrer over Tom Tully.
Yes, I agree. I think the ending, especially for Jose Ferrer, is very strong. He's really sort of going in there and hamming it up and sort of making accusations and all that, and it's a very flashy scene. So it's kind of odd that he didn't end up winning, or not winning, but at least nominated.
And like Tom Tully kind of disappears after like the first half hour of the movie.
Yeah. So
that's what really confused me.
Meh.
And I just also want to mention Fred McMurray and Robert Francis, who probably for me are the other 2 best performances in the film.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about how Robert Francis feels like the lead of the film for like the first 20 minutes. And he's really introduced as the character we're following and sort of the eyes into this world. And then he sort of just disappears.
And then he comes back at points and he feels like the lead again.
Right. So it's an interesting shifting throughout of perspectives that is very inconsistent. I don't know. Just kind of odd choices for me.
And then Fred McMurray is good in everything.
Well, yes, we know that.
And I also want to mention that this was a producing credit for Stanley Kramer, who would be a very well-regarded director after this.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think this was one of the first, in addition to High Noon, of being really putting him on the map as an Oscar favorite, as a producer as well as a director. So how about Three Coins in the Fountain?
Oh, dear Lord.
This film, I'm sorry to say to the fans, because there's so many out there, that this film is abysmal.
It's horrible. It's one of the worst Best Picture nominees I've ever seen.
I have no idea how this got nominated for Best Picture. It's about
and this movie won 2 Oscars.
It was nominated for 3 Oscars, and it won the 2 categories that weren't Best Picture.
It won cinematography over a movie we will discuss in a second.
Yes.
And it won Song over another movie we will discuss in a second. Both are absolutely disgusting
Ridiculous
and reprehensible.
Ridiculous wins that I do not understand for a second. Yeah, it's about 3 women who are in Rome who throw coins in the fountain because they want love or something. And it's good luck. And then they get involved with these men, a few things go wrong, and by the end of things, I really just don't care because everything feels so half-hearted for me. I don't care about any of these characters. There's no work put into making you care about them. I think the only real redeeming thing here is the Rome backdrop. Very pretty. Sure.
And they really emphasize the cinemascope.
Exactly. Yes. It goes back to sort of that thing of films back then, sort of like the Sundowners, where it's just nice to see what's going on in another country. You know, let's just look at these backgrounds and just escape to a different land for an hour and a half. Call it a movie.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, great backgrounds, beautiful backgrounds.
Yep, that's the review we've come up with.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm truly like it wasn't even a box office hit.
It was like a modest hit.
I don't know.
It doesn't even have stars in it. It doesn't even have a well-known director.
Right.
I'll read this Wikipedia entry.
Okay.
Jean Niguelsko was called the first real master of cinemascope.
Well, there you go. Maybe that had something to do with it.
And he also did How to Marry a Millionaire the year before, so I guess that's notable.
Yeah. Yes. Well, this was from Jackson DeStefano, who asked us how this film got nominated for Best Picture, and he goes on to say, I've tried to wrap my head around this for ages, but I can't comprehend how both Sabrina and Rear Window lost out. Hell, even The High and the Mighty would have made more sense.
We'll get to High and Mighty.
Yes. But I also think it would have made more sense. I sort of agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. It had more nominations.
Yeah, it has an all-star cast, and it's a big disaster movie. So
no, I'm just gonna say bribery.
It could be.
Because I mean, you talked about Dr. Dolittle in '67, and that's the only explanation for that. So
yeah, that sadly is a factor, especially at this time. Things aren't really as enforced as much, so that you might be onto something there. Oh God, please. Honestly, the only reason to watch this is if you are an Oscar completist.
And I checked out like 10 minutes in and was just messaging Kevin the entire time about how bad it was.
Yeah. So, there you have it. Interesting lineup, to be sure. I mean, for me, it's a very clear top 2, right? And then we have, depending on your taste, either Seven Brides for Seven Brothers or The Cane Mutiny as your 3 and 4. I would actually, honestly, despite the problematic elements of Seven Brides, I would probably put that as my number 3.
Agreed.
And then The Cane Mutiny, solid 4. Not too much wrong with it, but didn't really connect with it as much. And then 3 Coins in the Fountain, boy bye.
There are so many more worthy movies than 3 Coins in the Fountain.
Yes, which we shall get to right now. Good transition. Lots of good transitions today. So, this is our Should Have Been a Contender segment. And now more relevant than ever on this episode. And this is where we discuss other films that were not nominated for Best Picture, any old film that came out in 1954. So, Daniel, what is at the top of your list?
Rear Window?
Yes. Go.
I mean, how did this not get nominated for Best Picture? It's kind of a crime.
It's the perfect crime, truly.
I mean, I know y'all had given Hitchcock his for Rebecca, but come on.
Yeah, definitely a top 5 Hitchcock film. Very influential. Really is exploring like voyeurism in an interesting way, and I think it's a fascinating film to come out from this era, because I can only imagine being in the 50s, sort of that sense of consumerism and sort of comparison with others, wanting to see what your neighbors are doing, making judgments, judging each other. I think it's a very clear example of what Hitchcock really did well as an artist, which is just revealing what he wants you to see in exactly the order he wants you to see them in. That limited perspective, that whole thing. And how
I'm just going to say it right now, James Stewart and Thelma Ritter were robbed.
That is fair. Yes. Thelma Ritter, who is popping up quite a bit in films of this era, obviously, is often someone who is said to be sort of playing herself in a lot of films, kind of having a presence that is quite familiar to audiences and is kind of typecast. But I do think here she is really, really strong and definitely would have made a great supporting actress contender, considering the lineup we got. I mean, right.
I mean, we needed somebody besides Eva Marie Saint. We could have done Thelma Ritter Academy.
Yeah, why not? I mean, they gave her 6 nominations, so why not a 7th?
And James Stewart makes having a broken leg look so cinematic.
Yes. And also Alfred Hitchcock makes that cinematic.
And like, I mean, we talked a lot about Grace Kelly in Country Girl, but yeah. I mean, her entrance in this movie.
Oh my God. I live.
I mean, Lisa Carol Fremont.
Where was her supporting actress nomination? Would you say
she was actually given lead for this by NBR?
Well, was that one of those things where it was like all 3?
I think all 3.
Yeah.
I think she got it for all 3.
Okay.
And we can talk about the other one right after this, but I just want to bring this up. She is just alluring in this movie.
She is, and you know what? You know what else? She's having a lot of fun. And I think it's really sort of infectious to sort of see her energy, because she really gets so invested in this case, you know, and she's like, once she's going outside, she's like giving James Stewart a little wave. And it's just such a fun performance from her. The contrast with the Country Girl.
Every single thing she wears in this movie should be framed.
Again, iconic. Yes.
I mean, Edith Head is a legend for a reason.
Edith Head snapped once again. Where was that costume design nomination?
Okay, this movie deserved like an additional 2 acting nominations, a Best Picture nomination, a costume design nomination. It deserved the world.
Film editing. Where was that?
Also, I mean, again, the loss in cinematography to 3 Coins in the Fountain is a crime. It's a crime against humanity.
It's disgusting, and they should be tried.
I mean, this is some of the best cinematography of all time.
Yeah, and all of that perspective is so key to the film that I don't understand why it doesn't end up winning that. I mean, okay, fine, Rome is beautiful. We all know that.
But, like, the different uses of lenses and the uses of lighting and color and perspective.
Exactly. So.
I mean, this movie is all about its cinematography, and that loss just pisses me off.
Yeah. And to have it be to a film like that is just make it make sense.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Raymond Burr playing the classic villain in this movie.
Yes. Very menacing, I think. Yeah, especially by the end there. It really gets, even if the film is not necessarily very much like horror or thriller type for a lot of it, it's much more of just a sort of straightforward drama for some of it. I think by the end, you really feel your heart racing as he's entering Jimmy Stewart's apartment complex.
And I think we should switch to the other Hitchcock film from this year, because that man had a year in 1954, which is Dial M for Murder.
Well, before we do that, let's get a few questions from Rear Window out of the way. Ian Blacklock said, how close was Rear Window to getting a Best Picture nomination?
I mean, I think it was probably like 6 or 7.
Yeah, it gets in for director, which automatically makes it like 6, 7, or 8 at the very least. And so it's really between that and Sabrina and The High and the Mighty for that 6th slot. I really want to say it's Rear Window.
I think it was The High and the Mighty, but
that's very unfortunate of you to say. And it hurts my feelings, because I'm going to say it's Sabrina, which we will also get to. I think it was pretty close. Obviously, again, the director nomination is a good sign that it was right up there. Gets 4 nominations overall, which is solid. I wish
it deserves so much better.
I think if it was truly 6 that would have had an acting nominee at the very least.
Thelma Ritter in there.
Yeah. So close, but not that close is my answer. And then Juan Carlos Ollano said Grace Kelly in Rear Window, lead or supporting?
Lead.
That's really tough for me.
She's the female lead of the film, and she is like a huge part of the action.
No, that's true. We'll go with lead. Yeah.
And she ends the movie, and she has the
right.
the cinematic framing in her introduction.
Yeah, she's a lead. She's a lead.
I mean, I just want to bring it up again. The first shot of Grace Kelly in the movie might be my favorite shot in the history of film.
Luminous, truly. We have Lucino Vishanti, who said, had Grace Kelly turned down Rear Window to do On the Waterfront, would she have won 2 Oscars in one night?
Yeah. But I really don't want to think of a world without Grace Kelly in Rear Window.
Yeah. I don't know who would have played that role that would have done it even close to as well as Grace Kelly. I'd say, once again, I'm fine with letting history be what it was. But I do think, I mean, if she was in On the Waterfront as well, like, I almost wonder if she would have been placed in lead for that and then got in over The Country Girl.
I mean, if she was in On the Waterfront on top of what else she did in that year.
Yeah. Either way, Grace Kelly was walking away with at least 1 Oscar that year. But yes, let's get into Dial M for Murder.
I mean, could Hitchcock and Grace Kelly have a better year? The answer is no.
Name a more iconic duo. I'll wait.
I mean, this movie is kind of underappreciated in Hitchcock's oeuvre.
Yes. It's not necessarily a top 2 or 3 thing that people say, but it's certainly well appreciated at the same time.
And, I mean, Ray Milland was an underrated star for his time.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
And this movie just, I mean, again, the costumes.
Costumes. Actually, a great year for costumes. That's one thing we should talk about.
There were some major snubs in costumes this year.
Yeah.
And also, the fact that Dial M did not get a single Oscar nomination is a crime against humanity.
Yeah, I think it was probably seen as just a little more commercial. For whatever reason. I know they also tried to do 3D, right, with this, so...
Yes, it was really an ambitious kind of undertaking for its time.
Yeah. Not entirely sure why it doesn't get any sort of awards attention, but I guess maybe Rear Window just overshadowed it in terms of making a bit more of a ambitious sort of look at the 50s and voyeurism and all that stuff, whereas Dial M for Murder is very twisty and exciting and fun, but maybe doesn't have as grand of a point in the long run, if that makes sense.
But Grace Kelly is also fantastic in Dial M for Murder.
Yes.
This woman.
Once again, she snapped. I haven't seen it in actually quite a long time. I watched it back in high school when I was in a Hitchcock phase. But...
me either. I was actually shown Dial M from... This was my first Hitchcock movie, when I was very young, probably in elementary school. Wow. My dad is a lover of Hitchcock, and he introduced me to him, so This was the first one I watched.
That's sweet. You must have been thrown for a loop. All the twists.
I mean, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Yeah. So,
and I think we should now move on to a big one, and that is A Star Is Born.
Oh, Lord, was this movie done dirty.
Oh, my Lord. So, I feel like this film and everything that went into it could be a whole episode of this show unto itself.
I mean, there have been many, many poetics waxed about this movie.
Yes. There's so much behind-the-scenes drama that unfolded here. But, well, let's just give the context. Remake of the 1936 movie obviously would be remade again in 1976 and then just last year. And this is the one with the legendary Judy Garland, which is truly, truly one of those performances that leaves everything on the floor. And the extended musical numbers are just insane. I mean, the man that got away is everything.
Lord.
Lord.
Also born in a trunk.
Yes, that is what I was going to mention. I've seen some divisiveness around that sequence, actually, because it does go on for quite a while.
Right? I love it.
But I think she is so captivating and is so in control of that entire sequence. All of those costume changes, doing so much with just her body, you know, like the amount of physical acting she's doing here is like, what more can she have done? Like literally nothing else. And yet,
that whole sequence in the house, where she's just dancing around the house
and like doing all the different places around the world. Yeah.
She did everything. I mean, look, I will defend Grace Kelly's win, but I would have chosen Garland in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Not a hot take. But I think like 95% of people would be like, yeah, Judy was robbed.
And again, with 3 Coins in the Fountain winning a song it didn't deserve, how does The Man That Got Away not win Best Original Song?
Well, this I had to find the answer to, so I dug deep. And I did find in Inside Oscar some details about the campaign for A Star Is Born, and they made specific mention of the fact that the studios just did not campaign this movie, and its Oscar nominations were received on the strength of all of the things that they were nominated for. It got
6 nominations.
Yeah, it got 6 nominations and didn't win any of them. Again,
which is a shame.
Again, they were not able to campaign for it.
I mean, I'd argue it should have won 4.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe even 5.
Well, are you saying everyone except James Mason?
Well, no. I mean, look, I would give On the Waterfront score probably, but I mean, that's a great score.
It's a wonderful score, yeah.
And the production design in this movie is out of this world. I mean,
completely bonkers. It's illegal what they do with this film.
And everything Judy Garland wears out of this world.
Yep.
Her suit at the beginning when she's doing her first dance number.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yeah. And in addition to all of those wonderful musical sequences, we also have such a heartbreaking, dramatic performance in the middle of all of this for her, right? Because
I mean, yes, and from James Mason as well.
Yes. But there's this one beautiful, dramatic moment where she's backstage talking to the studio head about Norman, and it's so heartbreaking. She has like the freckles on her face. I'm sure you remember that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it's so heartbreaking and raw, especially when she's saying over and over that she hates herself. And you just feel like everything that Judy had went through up to that point was poured into that one scene. It's just so affecting. And then the final 20 minutes is where James Mason, I think, really shines too, where it's really getting into his clear alcoholism and depression and the fact that he's just a has-been and nobody wants him anymore in Hollywood. But she's just willing to stick by him.
And I'm just going to say the snubs for both George Cukor and Moss Hart are crimes against humanity.
Yes, more crimes to add to the tally. I totally agree. I think the fact that George Cukor was not nominated for director is kind of rude. Because you look at all of that, what that man had to go through in the making of this film. I mean, a lot has been said about how Judy Garland had a reputation, you know, and the fact that the studio went ahead and just cut 30 minutes out of it without his knowledge. Yeah. In addition to the fact that, I mean, it's worthy on its own merit, because I think it's, despite the fact that it's about 3 hours, I think it goes by at a good, solid clip. And
it did not. Look, This movie's 3 hours and it felt shorter than 3 Coins in the Fountain.
Exactly, which felt like 4. I think, especially towards the end there, it's just such Such captivating direction, and the chemistry between Judy Garland and James Mason is so strong by the end there. And I just wanted to take another look at you.
Oh my god, the second time he said it, I was in tears.
Yep. Kind of like what happened with the 2018 remake.
And also, there is just a curse for directors of this movie not named William Wellman, and we should talk about that William Wellman movie.
You should talk about that.
Oh, The High and the Mighty.
No, I mean about the curse.
Oh, the curse. Well, I mean, look, Bradley Cooper didn't make it either.
Right. And the 1976 version did even worse than all of these.
Well, because it was mainly a Streisand doing everything.
Yeah,
but
yeah. But yeah, a really, really fascinating curse of A Star is Born. Really sort of disappointing more often than not with the Oscars. And I'm not sure what the reason is behind that. Maybe it's the expectations. I don't know. But before we get to The High and the Mighty, we have so many questions about A Star is Born that I want to get to. Because I was expecting this, truly, but still. This was from Gordon at Mark Wahlberg, who said, supposedly the gap between Garland's vote total and Kelly's was only 6 votes, the smallest gap at that time not to result in a tie. Why do you think that was so close?
I mean, Garland was Towering Inferno and Grace Kelly had the year of all years.
Yeah, pretty much. I think there was clear sides to that, and they were both fantastic. And I think, honestly, the sad reality is Academy voters' personal feelings on the two of those actresses factored into why Grace Kelly won.
And I just want to bring this up. They had cameras in Judy Garland's hospital room because she had just given birth to her son, Joey.
Yeah.
They really thought she was going to win.
And she probably did, too. So, pretty heartbreaking for that to happen. But again, she has a whole thing saying about how, like, you know, her child is really the Oscar she earned. Jeffrey Cares asked us, was Judy Garland losing Best Actress for A Star is Born the first of many instances where a comeback story just did not pan out at the Oscars, like what we've seen in recent years with Mickey Rourke, Michael Keaton, and Sylvester Stallone?
And Glenn Close.
How dare you?
I'm sorry, I had to.
I tried to go this whole episode without mentioning it, but it's true. Go ahead. Make your points.
I mean, yeah. That kind of explains it. And what would be really ironic is if the same thing happened to Renee Zellweger this year.
Yes. Despite the fact that she already has an Oscar, so it's a little different, but yeah. I think that is very possible.
I mean, it would be poetic in a way.
In a dark way, yes. Only for, like, Oscar nerds like us would it be poetic. I don't think anyone else would care. But just saying. Mark Lamb said, of course Judy was robbed. Sad on so many levels. Was it her bad reputation of being unreliable and costing money that did her in, or was it the box office? If A Star is Born had been a real blockbuster like last year's version, would all have been forgiven?
I'm just going to say Grace Kelly had the year. That's what I'm going to keep saying.
Grace Kelly had the year. Yeah. And in contrast to that, despite the quality of Judy's performance, yes, she had the reputation. Yes, she cost them money. It became one of the biggest budget films of all time at that point for a reason. And if it had made money, I'm sure it would have helped, but I don't know if that would have been able to surpass what Grace Kelly was able to do that year. So I do think that personal politics had a big factor in that decision. Mark Lamb also asked us about the song race.
Good Lord.
The Man That Got Away versus Three Coins in the Fountain for Best Song. The Man That Got Away has been covered countless times and will continue to be. Three Coins, not exactly a classic. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, this goes back to what I was reading in Inside Oscar about how they were not able to campaign the song. All of the other songs were campaigned very heavily, but that one wasn't, even though it was the best of the 5.
Yeah.
And the other final question we have is from Ronaldo Sosa, who said, which version of A Star is Born do you prefer? The Janet Gaynor version, the Judy Garland version, the Barbra Streisand version, or the Lady Gaga version?
I mean, of the two I've seen, which are Garland and Gaga, I think I prefer the Garland version ever so slightly, but it's really close.
Yes, I am a huge fan of the Lady Gaga version, I must say. But I think what they were able to do in 1954 and the circumstances behind it, in addition to the film itself, I think the 1954 version will always be the number one for me and quite a few people who have seen all of them. I actually haven't seen the Janet Gaynor version, so I can't really speak to that. But of the three I've seen, definitely Judy Garland.
And, just, to be frank, I'm one of the biggest Gaga stans out there.
Oh, same.
Saying this. I saw her on my birthday, Gaga stan. And
yeah.
I think even Gaga would say Judy.
Yeah. Period. Hey, let's talk about Sabrina.
Oh, yes.
So once again, we have another Billy Wilder film to talk about, which is always exciting for me.
I mean, we stan a legend.
We stan a legend. This one, he's nominated for director, Audrey Hepburn for Best Actress, wins for costumes for the fabulous Edith Head.
Deservedly.
Yes, my God. And it's another film like Funny Face that basically asks us to pretend that Audrey Hepburn is some average girl. Which, and then she, of course, transforms into this glamorous Audrey Hepburn that we all know and love. But beyond that, love Sabrina. Love Sabrina. You definitely love Sabrina.
Oh my goodness,
were very excited about this.
This movie is fantastic.
Yeah.
I was laughing hysterically the entirety of this film.
Yeah. Great comedy. Has everything that you love about a Billy Wilder film. It has the production design. It has the lovely black and white cinematography. All these great stars at the top of their game. And Audrey Hepburn is just so effortless and charming in roles like these. I love her singing La Vie en Rose. It's magical.
I mean, again, to connect to A Star is Born.
Hey, that's right. Wow, look at that. And here we have our old friend William Holden showing up again.
And our other old friend Humphrey Bogart showing up again.
Humphrey Bogart, yes. This is basically the studio system at work here. But yeah, William Holden playing the sexist, rakish guy again. But it works for him,
And Humphrey Bogart playing the sophisticated CEO.
Exactly. So I love the scene where William Holden falls down. That's very funny.
Oh my God. And can we just talk about the ass hammock?
The ass hammock is iconic. Yes. I want it. I want that hammock.
I also just want to bring up a small supporting performance from Marcel Hilaire.
Yes.
As Sabrina's culinary instructor, because he had the line of the movie.
Say it.
Which is, the souffle, it must be gay.
And you're just like, preach.
It
must be gay.
I mean, that is my motto in life.
That is what you take with you as you go out into the world. Truly. Yes. But yeah, just a lovely little romantic love triangle once again at the center of the film. And here's my question. Do you think that she goes with the right person by the end of that?
Look, I would have gone for Holden.
Sure. We all would have on this podcast.
But, I mean, in the context of the film, Humphrey is a lot kinder to her.
Yes. And more stable.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah. But I'm also just going to throw this out there. It would be nice to see an Audrey Hepburn role where she is romantically involved with someone her own age. I'm just going to say that. But,
Also, she could do movies like this in her sleep. She was just the queen of this kind of movie.
She dominates this, and I'm obsessed. Yeah, she's great.
And
one of
God,
her
is
best
she
roles.
so good.
Yeah.
She is so good in this.
She really is. Well, we should talk about the other director nominee from this lineup, shall we? We hinted at it.
Going back to The Curse of A Star is Born, William Wellman, who directed the first Star is Born, took George Cukor's spot for his film The High and the Mighty.
The High and the Mighty, which If you remember around the 70s or 80s era of this podcast, I talked a lot about the big all-star disaster films. Well, here we are again, folks. And we have one of the first real big all-star blockbuster disaster movies. It's Airplane. It's pretty much you probably, I mean, you said it when we were talking about it, that this was kind of like a basis almost for the Airplane movies that parodied it.
I mean, Robert Stack is even in this movie.
Exactly. So, John Wayne is also in this movie for some reason.
And it's like, so the way I put this to Kevin all over our messaging was, it's like John Wayne is in flight, but the rest of the cast is in Airplane.
Exactly. I'm not a fan of John Wayne. We've established this on the show before, but in here he's really out of place. I don't know what he's doing. I don't think he knows what he's doing. Not on a horse. He's in the air, and it's very confusing for him. And the supporting actresses, we get two from The High and the Mighty nominated here. We have Jan Sterling and Claire Trevor, both nominated for The High and the Mighty, for roles that, as you put it in our messaging, you do not remember.
I couldn't pick them out of a lineup.
Yeah. One of them is playing a beauty queen sort of thing, and one of them is playing a former actress. And I did have to look that up.
Like, they are so unmemorable.
Yeah.
It's really mind-boggling that they got nominated over someone like Thelma Ritter.
Yeah. It's a 2.5 hour film, and it feels like it. And I really don't see a film like this being like a acting showcase in any way that you would choose to nominate anyone from it, because let alone two. It's one of these things that's, again, quite baffling to me. And I know Jan Sterling actually won the Golden Globe for this.
What?
Yeah. Yep.
Essentially what?
Yes, let me look at that category. Actually, okay. Well, there were no other nominees. So that might explain things, why she might win over an Eva Marie Saint, for example. Because there were no other nominees. But, yes. She played the beauty queen, who I believe she has a few scenes where she's really crying and emoting, and so I sort of get it, but...
And I just want to bring this up. This movie won Best Score over On the Waterfront, which is a crime against humanity, once again.
Yeah. One of only two categories that On the Waterfront loses, and I have to say, I just watched The High and the Mighty this morning. I don't really remember the score. And there's just this one little melodic tune that goes throughout the film that's just repeated over and over, that I guess is the reason why it won, and it's fine.
And it was nominated for Best Song, too.
Right. It's fine.
Which I'm like, how?
Yeah. Not much to add on that. I don't think it should have been a contender, but I think it's noteworthy to talk about, because we got another question from Mark Lamb, who said, Best Director and Picture are usually very close, but in 1954, Hollywood greats Wellman, Wilder, and Hitchcock were up for Director, but their films were left out. Why such a dichotomy?
I just think they were really going for popular stuff in Picture, and we're going for the real auteur stuff in Director.
Yeah. I mean, I often think the director's branch is the best branch of the Academy because they're the most forward-thinking, and they're the most appreciative of films that are actually doing something innovative with film, and we see that here very clearly. And even if The High and the Mighty isn't really, like, that much of a quality film, there's at least some attempt to make this big epic of all this all-star cast and all of that. So sometimes there's just a split because, again, like you were saying, it's just they go for films that were more popular in Best Picture and everybody votes on it. So it's not just directors.
And I mean, I feel like I could have seen Stanley Donen over William Wellman, but I feel like they just went for the achievement.
Yeah, that would have been nice. Yeah. For the
or
choreography
even someone like
alone.
Edward Dmytryk, because The K Mutiny was such a hit.
Yeah, I would have understood either of those over over the High and the Mighty, but I also get it because, again, William Wellman is who he was.
I mean, yeah, he was a legend.
Yeah. He was responsible for Wings. So
and the original Star is Born.
And the original Star is Born, exactly. Do you have another film that you want to talk about next?
I think I just want to get into the other two Best Actress nominees.
Excellent. Okay. Where do you want to start? Do you want to do Carmen Jones?
Let's talk about Carmen Jones, because I was really surprised by this movie.
Yes. So it is an adaptation of the musical, which is an adaptation of the opera, Carmen. For me, it isn't necessarily like a fantastic film by any means that was robbed of Best Picture, but I do think it deserved a little more than just Dorothy Dandridge and score. I think Dorothy Dandridge is so good in Carmen Jones, just so effervescent and charming. I know she didn't do any of her own singing.
Which is shocking, because she's freaking Dorothy Dandridge.
Yeah, she can sing.
And same with Harry Belafonte, because he's freaking Harry Belafonte.
Yes, but it's mostly like that operatic sort of singing, so I sort of get it, but also, they could have done it.
Two singers not singing in the movie. That's the one gripe I really have with it.
Yeah. But otherwise, I think she's so good. I think she's sultry and confident and just totally, like, in control as this woman who knows exactly what she wants. I don't think the film is as interesting outside of her, personally, but there's a lot of great craft as well, like the costumes and the production design.
And, I mean, I think some of the performances in here also should have gotten more mention.
And, yeah, Harry Belafonte is very good as well.
And there's there's shirtless Harry Belafonte. I mean, what more could you want?
That is a thing.
And also, Olga James, who played the other love interest for Harry Belafonte, really stood out here, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And again, this supporting actress lineup could have used some sprucing up. I don't know why she wasn't considered.
Yeah, the Academy can be what it can be sometimes, if you know what I'm saying.
And then you also have someone like Pearl Bailey.
Yeah.
And she is a scene stealer herself in this.
Yeah, as the best friend, yeah.
I just really admired the ambition of this. I mean, directed by a legend like Otto Preminger.
Yeah, that's right.
The ambition and the audacity, like, they made an all-black cast musical in 1954. It's kind of incredible to think about.
It is, and it's on a mainstream level as well. So,
I mean, It was a hit. It was a major hit.
Yeah, and it makes sense that it was a hit.
And it won the Golden Globe for Best Picture, Musical, or Comedy.
Did it
over
really?
A Star is Born.
Oh wow, yeah.
Which is kind of shocking. But
yes.
Also, it was the only one nominated in the category, so...
Okay, so this is another one of those that... All right. Yeah. Fair enough. But we should also mention the fact that this is some history being made, right? Because Dorothy Dandridge is the first black actress to be nominated for lead actress.
And, I mean, deservedly so.
Yeah. And this is from Joey Gentili, who said Dorothy Dandridge became the first black actress to be nominated for a leading actress Oscar here this year. Do you feel that despite the history that was made from it, Dorothy's moment was overshadowed by the Kelly upset over Garland?
No. I think this is one of those Oscar nominations that really should be examined in more detail again. Like The Country Girl, which got overshadowed, the movie that got overshadowed by The Win.
Yeah. I mean, it's history being made here. And yes, the discussion overall of the best actress of this year is clearly between Grace Kelly and Judy Garland. But yes, I think more people should check out Carmen Jones and see a really compelling, fascinating actress at work.
And then let's talk about Magnificent Obsession.
Magnificent Obsession, my one obsession, Douglas Sirk at the moment.
And my obsession, Rock Hudson.
Well, yes, that's also one of my obsessions, I should say. This is one of the most melodramatic, soapiest films I have ever seen. Even for Douglas Sirk. And once again, we have Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson as our central couple. And Rock is basically playing this playboy who's very selfish and arrogant, and he gets injured, and the doctor who's helping him ends up having a heart attack and dying, and he meets the doctor's widow, who's played by Jane Wyman, and he ends up pursuing her. She gets in an accident and goes blind.
Yeah.
There's so many twisted turns, but it's also, I think, also grounded in these great central performances by Rock and Jane. That Jane Wyman is quite fantastic, especially when she ends up going blind, and how she is able to evoke this idea of falling in love with someone after she loses her sight. I think she's just so grounded that she makes you believe her and believe in this film that is often very unbelievable in some of sort of the contrivances.
And Rock Hudson's character arc really is compelling in this.
Yes.
I mean, every time he was on screen, I'm just like, Lord have mercy.
Yeah. Again, one of those films where it's just ridiculous how hot he is.
Especially, like, there's that one scene where he's getting changed in the doctor's quarters.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Douglas Sirk knew what the audience wanted.
I mean, with this and with John Gavin in Imitation of Life, he really knew how to shoot men.
He did. And also, All That Heaven Allows with Rock Hudson is just, like, the ideal. But I already talked about that, so I won't make my listeners uncomfortable. We got a question from Brandon Stanwyck, who said, more of a command than a question, but please praise Jane Wyman in Magnificent Obsession for several minutes.
I mean, she's phenomenal.
Yes. And she's someone who I think she's not really like an actress from her field that necessarily has translated as like this big star of the 50s.
I mean, she's an Oscar winner for Johnny Belinda.
She is, yes. But I feel like she doesn't have like that level of showy acting that people really gravitate towards, which is a compliment to her completely. But I think she's so underappreciated, despite the fact that she has an Oscar and she was nominated for this. I just feel like a modern audience isn't necessarily aware of some of her work, especially with Douglas Sirk, which is really, really strong. And I think that was a good partnership.
I think more people just know her as Ronald Reagan's ex-wife, which is a shame.
Yeah, there is that factor. Magnificent Obsession is not one of my number 1 or 2 sort of favorite Douglas Sirk, but it's still one of his most iconic films. And if you think it's too overdramatic, then maybe that's the point. Yeah, it's intentional. As Miley Cyrus would say, it's a strategic hot mess. There you have it. There you have it, folks. Did you want to get into a little bit of the Barefoot Contessa here? Because that's our supporting actor winner.
For reasons beyond me.
Yeah, so Edmund O'Brien is our Oscar winner for Best Supporting Actor for the Barefoot Contessa. Playing like a agent or something. I don't know.
He's like only in a third of the movie.
Yeah.
And he's really unmemorable.
Very, 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 very supporting. He has like one scene where he's yelling over the phone. I think that was notable. But other than that, it's another one that another win this year that I don't really understand. I know he was a celebrated character actor, and it was nice to see him in kind of a bigger role like this, quote unquote bigger. But otherwise, I do think that he really benefited from vote splitting with On the Waterfront.
Yeah, because I really think if Rod Steiger hadn't gotten that coattail nomination, either Cara Malden or Lee J. Cobb would have won the Oscar.
That is 100% likely, yes. But another thing is from Inside Oscar that Edmund O'Brien did campaign quite a bit, which is a factor.
And this was a Joe Mankiewicz film, and he was a very well-respected director of the time.
Yes. And this is, once again, Humphrey Bogart.
I mean, yeah, him and William Holden were everywhere.
They couldn't get enough. And Ava Gardner is playing the Barefoot Contessa herself.
Not Ina Garten, guys.
Right. Sorry. But before Ina Garten, Ina, who knows, there was Ava Gardner, who I think is pretty solid in the film, even though, despite the fact that the film is about her, it feels like it's also not really from her perspective, so it's kind of shortchanges her performance, I think, because otherwise I think she might have contended more for a nomination.
I'm still surprised. I mean, if they had campaigned her supporting, which of course they wouldn't have because she was a star,
right?
She could have gotten in.
And the titular role.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny how she's supporting in her own movie.
Yeah, very odd. Very odd film that I wasn't a huge fan of. But, again, another one of those films for Oscar completists to just check it off. I just wanted to talk about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, this is a really notable film.
Yeah, and it wins for visual effects. And it wins
deservedly so.
And
incredible.
It wins for art direction.
I mean, both were incredible achievements for their time.
Yes. And this is a film you can watch right now on Disney+. Spectacular visuals, again, for 1954. Pretty extraordinary, especially, this isn't CGI. This is practical movie magic right here,
And here we have James Mason yet again.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. I was going to say, yes, as Captain Nemo.
And Kirk Douglas as an affable lead, as he was known to do.
Groundbreaking. But yeah, this is another one. I saw this as a kid, but the giant squid sequence is really stunning. And again, without CGI. And yeah, James Mason with his little eyebrows as Captain Nemo. Fun performance. This is from San Diego Cinerama, who said 1954 saw the premiere of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea featuring Captain Nemo. Would Disney have tried for a Jules Verneverse based on Nemo's return in Mysterious Island?
I mean, Disney was not in that financial situation at the time.
That is a very good point. But if they wanted to, I'm sure they could. And in terms of today, they would have made it a multiverse.
I mean, this was really one of Disney's earliest forays into live action.
Exactly.
So...
yeah, they weren't the company that they are now by any means.
They were much more focused on their animation department.
Yeah. Just another one I wanted to just quickly mention that is the top money earner of the year, White Christmas.
I mean,
which also had Bing Crosby.
Yeah, I know. So much crossover.
Yeah. Since we're in the midst of the holiday season, definitely one of those classic Christmas movies to just put on and not think too much about and listen to the nice Irving Berlin score.
Which is ironic because he's a Jew.
Well, yes, that's what happens. But did you have another film that you wanted to mention here, or are we all tapped out?
Well, there's a couple.
Okay, very good.
Actually, a few. Just a couple notable things. So, Broken Lance was nominated for supporting actress for Katie Jurado, and she was the first Latina actress nominated for an Oscar.
Yes, more history being made.
And, well, I may not have loved the film. I'm just glad that it's here for that.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, just to connect to your past episode, she was married to Ernest Borgnine for a few years.
Heyo. That's interesting. And you also watched all of the acting nominees, right?
Yes, so there are two more. So, Executive Suite. Nina Falk is nominated here, but I'm kind of surprised William Holden wasn't.
William Holden, what are you doing? He's in this one, too.
I mean, he is really the highlight of this film, and it's also got previous winner Frederick March.
And it has...
Barbara Stanwyck.
Shelley Winters, hello.
Yes, Shelley Winters, and then Nina Falk, who got the nomination, who I know best from my childhood as Moses' mom in the Ten Commandments.
Beautiful, yep. That's fair.
And she basically plays the secretary here, so really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that, and just to bring up Katie Jurado again, she plays like the supportive wife role in Broken Lance.
Well, yeah.
Essentially.
Supportive wife, secretary.
I mean, these two nominations are very much time capsules.
I mean, is it that much changed?
I think we've gotten better.
We've gotten better.
I mean, look, Jennifer Lopez, if she happens this year, will be much better.
That is a very unique role. Yes, for sure. But we still see things like Claire Foy getting Oscar buzz for First Man. And obviously that didn't happen, but still.
And then I also watched Robinson Crusoe, which is a really interesting film for its time.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's basically a one-man show for a lot of it with Dan O'Herlihy, who got the Best Actor nomination.
As the titular role, of course.
And then you've got Jaime Fernandez playing, if you know the story, a prisoner he takes and basically makes a slave.
Yes.
Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know it's based on a book, and I know it's directed by a Mexican director, Luis Buñuel, or Buñuel, but this movie's really dated in a lot of ways.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't have any more movies to talk about, really, from this year.
I mean, I just had one more mention. That is Them.
Oh, Them! Exclamation point. Yes. And
it was nominated for visual effects, and it's about giant ants destroying everything.
That is the Them in question, yes.
And I saw this movie very young, because when I was young, my family had a tradition of just watching horror movies together from back in the day.
Well, and that explains it. Just kidding, go on.
I was really shocked to find out that this movie was an Oscar nominee.
Yeah, obviously for special effects, but sure, yeah. It's always nice to see.
And hey, Edmund Gwenn was in it, Mr. Santa Claus himself. And James Arness, very famous for Gunsmoke.
Yes, didn't expect a Gunsmoke reference, but there you go. We should also just mention Creature from the Black Lagoon also comes out, speaking of special effects.
Yes, it did! How did I forget about that one?
Because it wasn't nominated for anything.
I've seen that one too!
Yeah. Also one that does connect to Oscar history in some ways, because it was a bit of an influence for Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water.
Which is one of my favorite Best Picture winners of all time.
Yes, and I'm also a fan. But yes.
And that probably exhausts it.
Yeah, and I'm exhausted. So, 1954 is a fascinating year because, again, there's one film that's really clearly out in front, and then movies that are right below that, but a lot of the interesting ones are not in Best Picture.
Nope.
So, another fun year of the 1950s at the Oscars. We've got another fascinating year to come with 1953. So, when we come back, we will be delivering our verdict as to whether we think On the Waterfront properly deserved Best Picture or if The Country Girl should have taken it.
To present the award for the Best Motion Picture of the Year, the distinguished producer of last year's Best Picture, Mr. Buddy Adler.
Good evening. I was more nervous last year, but I'm just as excited this year. Last year. On the Waterfront, Dan Spiegel.
And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think On the Waterfront deserved Best Picture or if The Country Girl deserved it more. Daniel Brilliant, what is your verdict?
It's not close. On the Waterfront.
Yes. Anything else to add on the Waterfront?
I mean, if you haven't seen On the Waterfront, like, find it and watch it.
Yes. It's essential viewing, I think, if you are a fan of film. Not to be too dramatic about it, but, like, it is so influential and features such all-time performances and is also about something very real and makes characters that are dock workers that you wouldn't expect to be interesting, maybe, on screen to have a really fascinating story. And yeah, I think Elia Kazan's direction is top-notch from top to bottom. and it deserved all the Oscars it received and more, because I do think it should have gotten score and supporting actor on top of everything else. I do think it's one of those years where a film deserved to sweep. And I'm not always a big fan of sweeps, but this is one of those years where there's just one movie that towers over the others. Again, Country Girl, solid second, fine with that, but On the Waterfront, congrats Academy, you got it right for once. So, there you have it. So, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining me today. This was very fun, diving into all of these juicy films and performances and narratives. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. If people want to hear more from you, where can they find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at FilmNSports21. That's the letter N. You can find my writing at InSession Film. You can find my podcast on Twitter at the Gayvourites or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and whatever podcast source you use. And that's about all. And we did an episode with Kevin Jacobson discussing the 2015 Academy Awards.
That's right.
So highly recommend that one. It's one of my personal favorite episodes, not just because Kevin was on it, because it was a great talk.
And I had some stuff to say about The Revenant.
Well, we all did.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, actually. I would love to come back.
Oh, well, you're always welcome.
I appreciate that. And you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. The show's at Oscar Runner Up. Go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you find podcasts to subscribe, and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. 5 stars preferred. And if you like what you hear, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup to hear even more content. And you can even hear more from Daniel himself here talking about The Fighter, which was a very fun episode. And so, once again, thank you, Daniel.
And thank you, Kevin.
And I will bid you all adieu.